thank you, Ambassador. He is, to me, the ambassador. All these fancy titles that we give people so that they're not taken seriously don't work. Because in our eyes, you are the ambassador from Cuba to here, and those that went before you helped a great deal with the Elian Gonzalez case, and we did a partnership, and it was wonderful. I do want to greet my friends from the Council of Churches. Where are they, that I might see them? Put your hand, there you are. Thank you so much for being here. And you now have a new General Secretary here in the United States that is going to work very, very hard with you and work hard on the Cuban agenda. And so I couldn't be more excited. When you step down from a job, what you most of all want is someone to take the job that's going to think the same way and take the same risks. The National Council and the churches in this country have taken huge risks. And for the bishop, I would wish he could be here just to hear us. Bishop Gumbleton has given his life for causes, this being one of them. And the fact that he isn't well is a great sadness, because the fact is he has earned all the thanks that everybody can give him. So we really want to say to him at the distance, be well, take care, and we can hear his voice even if he isn't here. And Danny, thank you, of course, always, not just for being famous. Lots of people are famous, and they don't use it the way you do. And if my family could see me standing before you with this little electronic piece of equipment, they would laugh. At 82 years of age, this is not something in which I'm an expert. However, my granddaughter, who is in the Peace Corps in Peru, sent me a message, and I want to read it to you today. She went with me the last time, a year ago, when we went to see Elian. She found out more about Elian than I have found out in 20 years, partly because her Spanish is exquisite, and partly because she's very close to his age. And so when she heard that I was coming here, she said, I have something to say to these people. And her message is because after we had our conversations about the Cuban Five, she said, Grandma, I want to talk to the children of the Cuban Five. And at that point in time, she is 22 years old, so she's close to many of their ages. And at that point in time, very few people had gotten to talk to the children. And she spent all afternoon with them. I wasn't allowed to go. She had to go, and that was quite right, because she's their age, and had a conversation with them. And what she said to me is, please tell the people gathered that this work with the Cuban Five, like the work with Elian Gonzalez, is not just a legal struggle. It is an important legal struggle, but it is also a human story. And so let's see if I can make this work. This is from Katie. She says, when I had the fortune of meeting the Cuban Five's children last year, the whole issue of the Cuban Five seemed to me a little confusing and quite convoluted for someone who hadn't studied it. But she said, finally, the Cuban Five had for me a face. These were children who had their parents taken away from them for fighting for their country, and unintentionally spent their lives embroiled in a decades-old political conflict. It is often easy for Americans, especially from my generation, so distant from the Cuban Missile Crisis, to forget there even is an embargo. She made me realize that for the children of the Cuban Five, they have never lived without an embargo. And those of us who did live before the embargo are becoming older and fewer. The fact that we do not have diplomatic relations with Cuba is a thought that crosses few American minds under the age of 50. But when I got to meet their children, I saw that there were children just my age who were put in an impossible and seemingly insolvable situation because of ancient political conflicts. These were children who did not get to know their fathers, children who had to beg the United States to even see their fathers' faces or to send them letters. People who have been left voiceless and seemingly alone. It was heartbreaking to hear that the United States government had stripped one woman who stood faithfully by her husband, even though he was sentenced to life in prison, the opportunity to have children. Time drew on, biology took its toll, and the government never allowed her to have a conjugal, this is a 22-year-old, my granddaughter, allowed her to have a conjugal visit with her husband she loved dearly despite the difference. Meeting the children of the Cuban Five reminded me that in any political conflict, there are the faces that we forget, and often it is the women and the children. They are the people often left devoid of rights and hidden in the background. As we Americans should give them, the family of the Cuban Five, the right to speak, the right to be honored. These are not people charged with, they're people charged with treason. They are not the ones in jail, the families. They are not the ones charged with any crimes. But my way, that is that we as US citizens are treating them and putting them in a jail of our own making. We are responsible for the despair of these children and of their families, of their heartbreak, and of their lost dreams. Dear Grandma, hope this is enough. Katie was only 10 years old when Elian Gonzalez entered our family. And so she grew up understanding these issues. I have been to see Elian every year on his birthday. This year, he will be 21 years old. I will tell you a funny story. Someone who did not agree with me, of which there are still numbers of people, said to me, I hope you do understand that he is growing up to be a communist. I said to this person, you thought he was going to be a Republican? But he has grown up in his own country. I wish you all could see his face, could touch him, could see what a fine young man he is, what a great student he has been, and how ultimately important it was for him to be returned to the family that gave birth to him. This Cuban family is one of the strongest families, and I know them from great-grandmother, now gone, on down, through the grandmothers down to Elian. The fact of the matter is, the big thing at stake here is the Cuban Five in this day and on this issue. But deeper and as profound as that is what in the world this country has done to Cuba for more years than we want to count. I've been going to Cuba for 43 years. That this embargo has lasted for 43 years, we should be ashamed. And the fact of the matter is, the issue of the Cuban Five is a legal issue, but it is also profoundly an issue for us. And we need to take this up with our government. We need to talk to our representatives. We need to say to them, this has to end. And I think the Cuban Five are to be given enormous thanks for the sacrifice that they have made. It is almost miraculous to see the way they have kept their spirits up. Something in their upbringing, my friends, something in their families, something in what they learned in that country in which they live, have given the decency and the strength and the stamina that we have seen, and even the forgiving faces that we see. This is really quite an incredible group of people, and they have a lot to teach us about how children should be raised. And we have to say to our country over and over and over again, it is long past time for this embargo to be lifted. I remember my good friend Alacone, who was a man that I deeply respected. We would never have Elian back here. We would have never had him home had it not have been for Alacone. He was absolutely keen. And as we grow old together, he said to me, Joan, it is never the right time for Cuba. And so before I sit down, what I want to say to people gathered here from this country and from around the world, let us change this. Yes. Let us make this the right time for Cuba.